The forest in northern Michigan was a tangle of gnarled pines and damp earth, the kind of place where the silence could swallow you whole. Mark Rowlands, 31, adjusted his pack, his boots crunching through leaves as the sun dipped low. He'd been hiking the Manistee River Trail for 2 days, chasing solitude after a rough stretch at work. But an hour ago, he'd veered off path, chasing a shortcut that wasn't on the map. Now, lost in the fading light, he stumbled into a clearing and froze. A campsite sprawled before him, unmarked, untouched, and wrong. Tents stood in a ragged circle. 3 of them, nylon faded but intact, flaps unzipped. A fire pit smoldered, embers glowing faintly. The air thick with the sour tang of burnt wood and something sharper, like sweat gone stale. Mark called out, "Hello?" His voice bounced off the trees, unanswered. Personal gear littered the ground. Backpacks, a cracked water bottle, a single sneaker caked in mud. Everything looked abandoned, like its owners had bolted mid-breath. He edged closer, flashlight beam slicing the dusk. A sleeping bag spilled from one tent, half torn, its stuffing bleeding out like guts. The rustling hit then, twigs snapping in the underbrush, quick and sharp. Mark spun, light darting, but the woods stared back, still as death. His gut churned. He nudged a backpack open with his boot. Inside, a wallet. It reading Claire Hensley, 28. A chill crawled up his spine. No one was here, yet the camp hummed with absence. The rustling flared again. Closer, circling the clearing. Mark's beam caught a glint. A hunting knife, blade crusted with dark streaks, half buried in the dirt. He crouched, pulse racing, and spotted more. A torn shirt sleeve, stained red-brown, dangling from a branch. The fire's embers hissed, a faint pop cutting the quiet. He stood, scanning the tents, when the whistling started. Low, human, drifting from the trees. His hands tightened on the flashlight. It wasn't the wind. Night pressed in, the sky a bruise of purple and black. Mark rifled another pack. Keys, a phone with a dead screen, a photo of 2 women smiling at a trailhead. Claire's face stared back. The whistling grew, threading through the pines, and he bolted to a tent, ducking inside. The air reeked, damp fabric and something rancid. His light hit a notebook, pages scrawled with shaky ink. Day 3, he's watching. Won't stop. Mark's throat closed. The rustling returned. Footsteps now, heavy and deliberate. He crawled out, poker from the fire pit in hand, and froze. A shadow loomed at the clearing's edge. Tall, stocky, in a hooded coat. The whistling stopped, replaced by the scraping, metal dragging through dirt, slow and close. Mark backed toward the trees, breath shallow as the figure stepped forward, a rifle slung over his shoulder. Lost, huh? The man rasped, voice like gravel. Mark swung the poker, missing, and ran. The man's laugh chasing him, a guttural bark. Branches clawed his face, roots snagging his boots. The scraping followed, gaining, the man's footsteps pounding the earth. Mark tripped, tumbling into a ditch, flashlight rolling away. The beam caught the figure closing in, rifle raised, eyes glinting under the hood. Mark scrambled up, lungs burning, and broke through to a gravel road. Headlights flared, a truck screeching to a stop. He waved, screaming, "Help!" The driver, an older guy, hunter type, yelled, "Get in!" As the figure melted back into the woods. The driver dropped him at a ranger station, radioing it in. Cops searched the site by morning. 3 tents gear for missing hikers. Claire Hensley, Tara Miles, Jen Cook, all vanished that summer. Blood traces, a knife, signs of a struggle. They pegged it on a drifter, Dale Voss, ex-con, known for squatting in the wild, linked to petty thefts but never caught. No bodies, just a camp left to rot. Mark made it home to Lansing, shaken but alive. He ditched hiking, locked his doors tight. Weeks passed quiet, until one night, sorting his gear, he found a map in his pack. Not his. It marked the campsite, inside in red, with Rollins scratched beside it. His blood froze. He'd never told anyone his name out there. He checked his locks, peering through the blinds. The rustling started, faint, outside, like footsteps circling his house. He doesn't sleep much now, waiting for the whistling to find him. The fire was still smoldering. The food was untouched. Phones, wallets, and gear were all there. But the campers? Gone, and they never came back. Ranger Ethan Carter had seen plenty of strange things in his years patrolling the remote parts of the forest. People went missing all the time. Hikers who wandered off trail, campers who underestimated the elements. Usually, there was a reason, but this was different. It started with a routine patrol. A hiking permit that was never closed out. A group of 4 campers, Mark, Julia, Tyler, and Ashley, had checked in 3 days earlier. They were supposed to be out by now, but there was no record of them returning. Ethan decided to hike up to their last known location, It was 2 miles off the main trail, nestled in a valley where the trees grew thick enough to block out most of the sky. The perfect place for people who wanted to disappear for a while. The first thing he saw was the fire pit, still smoldering, faint wisps of smoke curling into the air. Someone had been here recently. Then the tent. It was intact, zippers closed. No signs of struggle. Inside, everything was in place. Sleeping bags, backpacks, half-empty water bottles. Even their phones and wallets were neatly stacked in the center of the tent. Ethan felt a cold chill crawl up his spine. If they had left, why would they abandon everything? He circled the campsite, looking for tracks. Nothing. No footprints leading away. No signs of animals dragging them off. Just the quiet hum of the forest. The kind that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Then, he noticed something else. Their last meal, a set of campfire plates filled with food, was untouched. A plate of spaghetti, congealed and cold. A half-open bag of trail mix, untouched. Like they had been about to eat, and then just stopped. Ethan radioed it in. Within hours, 2 more rangers arrived. They searched the area, called in search and rescue. Even brought out the dogs. Nothing. No bodies. No tracks. It was like they had vanished into thin air. Then one of the rangers found a GoPro in one of the backpacks. The battery was dead, but they plugged it into a portable charger. And that's when things got worse. The last recorded video was from the night before they disappeared. It started normal, the 4 of them laughing around the fire, Julia complaining about the cold, Mark making fun of her for packing too light. Then, a sound, a crack from the trees. Tyler turned the camera toward the darkness. Probably a deer, he said, but his voice wasn't convincing. The camera panned around, catching nothing but blackness between the trees. Then Ashley said something strange. It's closer than before. The camera shook as Julia asked, "What?" Ashley hesitated. "I've been hearing it all night. Every time we talk, it gets closer." Silence. The video glitched, skipping ahead. Something changed. The 4 of them weren't talking anymore. They were listening. The crackling in the trees had gotten louder. A wet snapping sound like something heavy stepping on damp wood. Then, breathing, right next to the camera. Heavy. Slow. Not human. The video cut out. That was the last time anyone saw them. Over the next 3 weeks, search teams combed every inch of the surrounding forest. They found no blood, no signs of struggle, just a tent filled with untouched belongings, as if they had never existed at all. The investigation turned up nothing. No missing persons matching their descriptions. No family or friends filing reports. It was like they had come from nowhere. and disappeared back into it. The case went cold. The campsite was cleared out. The tent was taken in as evidence. But the last ranger to handle it said it still smelled like firewood and something else, something rotten. 1 year later, the case became one of those stories, the kind hikers whispered about around campfires. A ranger found a tent with 4 missing campers, but no one ever found their bodies. Just a GoPro with a video no one can explain. But every so often, a new hiker goes missing in the exact same spot. And when the rangers go looking, they always find the tent. The fire is still smoldering. The food is untouched. The phones and wallets are still inside. But the campers, gone. Deep woods camping. Sounds idyllic, doesn't it? The brochures show smiling families roasting marshmallows, sunlight dappling through the leaves. Peaceful, serene. But that's the daytime lie. Night in the deep woods. Night is when the truth comes out. Night is when you realize how utterly, terrifyingly alone you are. And sometimes, in the dead quiet of the pre-dawn, you wake up, and everything is just wrong. The hiker, we'll call him Mark, was experienced. He'd chosen a remote site, miles from the trailhead, deep within a national forest known for its solitude. He liked being alone, needed it, maybe. Pitching his tent as dusk bled into darkness, he felt that familiar sense of calm settle over him. The stars were sharp pinpricks of light in the inky sky, the air crisp and cold, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The woods were silent, profoundly so, a silence that usually soothed him. Tonight, though, it felt heavier, more watchful. He shrugged it off as fatigue, the lingering tension of city life finally draining away. It felt good to be alone out here. Felt safe, or so he told himself, zipped into the thin nylon of his tent, listening to the rustle of leaves in the rising night wind. He woke abruptly with the dawn chill, that pre-sunrise cold that seeps into your bones and wakes you faster than any alarm. For a moment, disoriented, he just lay there, cocooned in his sleeping bag, listening to the world slowly awaken. A distant bird call, the whisper of wind in the pines, the creak of a tree branch somewhere deep in the woods. Normal sounds, reassuring sounds. He unzipped the tent flap, expecting to greet the pale light of dawn, the promise of a new day on the trail. He unzipped the tent and stopped, frozen, his breath hitched in his throat. The reassuring sounds of the waking woods suddenly fading, replaced by a roaring silence in his ears. Footprints, not animal tracks, not the paw prints of a raccoon or the delicate tracks of a deer he'd expected. Footprints, heavy, deliberate, deeply imprinted in the soft earth around his campsite. And not just around his tent, circling his tent, perfectly. A perfect, unbroken circle of boot prints, pressed into the earth maybe a foot or 2 from the tent walls, encompassing his small nylon dome in a chilling, precise ring, unbroken. No entry point into the circle, no exit, just a continuous, repeating pattern of heavy treads in the pre-dawn gloom. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against the sudden, oppressive silence. He scrambled out of the tent, adrenaline jolting through him, every sense on high alert. He spun in a slow circle, scanning the tree line, the shadowed undergrowth, checked his gear, scattered neatly just outside the tent entrance. Alone, utterly, disturbingly alone. No sign of anyone, no crackle of a campfire, no scent of wood smoke, no whisper of voices, no other camps, no other people for miles around. He was certain of it. Just him. And those prints circling, watching from the silent earth. He knelt, his fingers tracing the outline of one of the boot prints, deep. The tread was heavy, aggressive, the kind you'd see on work boots, or Combat boots. A man's boot, definitely. Size? Menacingly large. Intentional. This circle wasn't random. It was deliberate, carefully paced, meticulously completed, like marking territory. Or caging prey? The thought sent a fresh jolt of fear through him, colder, sharper than the morning air. The woods were silent again, the early birdsong abruptly ceasing, as if even the forest creatures had noticed something was wrong. Something was listening. The sun, still below the horizon, began to paint the eastern sky with streaks of pale pink and gray, but the light felt weak, hesitant to penetrate the heavy shadows clinging to the trees. And those shadows themselves, they felt different now, no longer just shadows of trees, but something denser, more sentient, imbued with a watching presence. Something watched from the trees now too. Not animal eyes, he knew instinctively. Human eyes. Or human-like. He didn't waste time with breakfast. Fear, cold and pragmatic, had taken the place of hunger. He packed fast, efficiently, his movements jerky, fueled by adrenaline, tearing down the tent, stuffing gear into his backpack, his eyes constantly flicking to the tree line, to the unbroken circle of prints in the damp earth. He didn't erase the prints, couldn't bring himself to disturb them, as if they were a warning, a message best left untouched. He left them there, stark and unsettling against the awakening forest floor. Circle, unbroken, message received loud and clear, etched in the silent language of boot prints and dread. Hike, cancelled. The peace, the solitude, the sense of safety, all shattered, replaced by a gnawing, persistent fear. Walking out, he kept a fast pace, almost a jog, his boots pounding a frantic rhythm on the trail. He didn't look back often, afraid of what he might see, but every few minutes, his gaze flicked over his shoulder, scanning the trees, the shadowed spaces behind him. The woods remained still, silent, outwardly unchanged. But the feeling of being watched, of being followed, of being circled, that feeling intensified with every step. The circle wasn't just around his tent anymore. The circle was around him now, watching, following, watching. He couldn't shake the image of those heavy boot prints, that perfect, unbroken ring, enclosing him, marking him, always behind him now, just beyond the edge of sight, just beyond the veil of trees, the circle, waiting. He never camped alone again, not truly alone, not in the deep woods, not where the silence could turn predatory, and the earth could whisper warnings in the language of footprints. The circle. It haunts him still, a silent, invisible ring of dread that tightens whenever he closes his eyes in the dark, whenever he finds himself in the quiet places. He realized, with chilling certainty, that day in the woods, the wilderness isn't empty. Something circles there, in the places unseen, unheard. Something watches, something waits for you to sleep. And sometimes it leaves a message etched in the earth, a perfect, unbroken circle. The woods around Asheville, North Carolina, swallowed the sun early, leaving a tangle of pines bathed in gray dusk. Jess Carter, 17, sprawled by the campfire, poking at the embers with a stick. Her brother Luke, 16, and buddies Mia and Tyler, both 17, lounged nearby. Their campsite, a messy sprawl of tents and coolers. 3 days into this end-of-summer escape, the air smelled of smoke and pine sap. But tonight, a sour undercurrent crept in, like meat left out too long. They were mid-argument about who'd burned the hot dogs when a branch snapped, loud, close, beyond the fire's glow. Jess sat up, peering into the dark. That wasn't a squirrel. Luke waved it off, cracking a beer. Raccoon, probably. But Mia's head tilted, eyes narrowing. It's too heavy for that. The fire hissed, spitting a spark that died in the dirt. and the forest went quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Later, passing around a bag of chips, a new sound cut through. A low grunt, rough and human, rolling from the trees. Tyler grabbed his flashlight, swinging the beam wild. "Who's out there?" Nothing moved, just shadows stretching long and thin. Jess' stomach flipped. Maybe it's a hiker lost or something. But the grunt came again, sharper, like a throat clearing, and the group traded looks. Nobody laughed this time. They called it a night, ducking into their tents. Jess tipped up beside Mia, the nylon walls trembling in the breeze. Outside, the grunt echoed, closer, paired with a faint shuffle, like boots scuffing dirt. She nudged Mia, who whispered, "It's circling us." Jess pressed her face to the mesh window. Darkness, nothing else. Luke's voice growled from the next tent. "Cut the paranoia, it's fine." But his tone cracked, and the shuffle paused, right outside their cluster. Around 2 a.m., Jess jolted awake. A twig broke, loud as a gunshot, 10 feet from her head. She shook Mia, both peering out. The shuffle started again, slow, methodical, tracing the camp's edge. Tyler's tent flap ripped open, his flashlight slashing the night. "Show yourself, asshole!" The beam caught a glint, metal, then darkness swallowed it. Jess's chest tightened. "We leave at dawn," she hissed. Mia nodded, but her hands fumbled with her sleeping bag, nails digging into the fabric. Morning hit sluggish and cold. They packed fast, tearing down tents when Luke stopped dead. "Check this out," a line of cigarette butts. Fresh, smoke down to the filter, ringed their sight, half buried in the dirt. Jess' knees wobbled. "We don't smoke." Tyler kicked one, muttering, "Some creep's been here." The grunt rumbled again. Low, guttural from the brush. And they bolted, gear bouncing as they hit the trail. By noon, they'd made it to a ranger station, dumping their story on a grizzled guy named Pete. He frowned, radioing it in. Had a missing camper last month. Guy named Dan Brooks. Never found him. Jess' throat went dry. That night, their last, they pitched closer to town, a spot off the highway. The fire burned low, the mood sour, when a new sound crept in. A faint click, like a lighter flicking, steady and close. Jess gripped a rock, scanning the trees. Not again. Tyler stood, voice sharp. "Come on out." The clicking stopped, and then they saw him. A man, lean and wiry, in a frayed coat, standing behind a thick oak, half his face lit by their fire. He stared, eyes flat, unblinking, locked on them. Luke choked out, "How long's he been there?" Mia's voice trembled. "All night. Maybe." Jess hurled the rock. It thudded into the tree, and he didn't flinch, just kept staring. Tyler charged, fists up, yelling, "Get lost!" The man stepped forward, slow, calm, pulling a hunting knife from his belt, its blade dull with rust. Jess screamed, "Run!" They scrambled to the car, piling in as he advanced, knife loose in his hand. Tires squealed, gravel flying, and he stopped at the road's edge, watching them peel out, his silhouette shrinking in the rear view. They hit the sheriff's office at sunrise, spilling everything. Deputies tracked it to Earl Ray Klein. Paralee, drifter, suspected in 2 hiker vanishings, never convicted. They raided his squat a mile from the first sight. Cigarette butts, stolen gear, a list of trails with dates. Cleaner slipped the net, gone by dawn. The teens crashed at Jess's place, rattled but safe. Or so they thought. A week later, Jess was alone, washing dishes when the power cut out. Blackout? Sudden and total. She fumbled for her phone, light catching the kitchen window. Outside, a cigarette glowed, red, steady, 5 feet from the glass. She froze, heart slamming, as it flared bright, then winked out. The next day, cops found Klein's prints on her sill. Ed stood there, inches away. No knife, no note, just watching. He's still out there, and Jess knows. Next time, he won't just stare. The air was unseasonably cold when they found Marcus Atkinson's backpack. Park Ranger Ellie Torres described the scene to me later, her eyes still haunted. It was just sitting there against a fallen log, perfectly upright, like someone had carefully placed it. No signs of struggle, no blood, just a navy blue Osprey pack with his wallet, supplies, and a Canon DSLR camera inside. The search for 27-year-old Marcus had been underway for 3 days in Olympic National Forest. After he failed to check in with his girlfriend, following what was supposed to be a 4-day solo photography trip. I'd known Marcus since college. We were both photography majors with a shared passion for nature shots. When his girlfriend Sarah called me in tears, I drove straight to Washington from Portland. The Rangers allowed me to view the camera's contents once they documented everything. That's when this already disturbing situation turned into something that still prevents me from sleeping through the night. The first 40 or so photos were exactly what you'd expect. Sweeping forest vistas, close-ups of unusual fungi, a curious fox at dawn. Marcus had always had an eye for composition. Around photo hash, the images showed his campsite setup, a small clearing between ancient pines, his orange North Face tent positioned perfectly to catch the morning light. Then came photo hash 47. Marcus stood smiling in front of his tent, the self-timer having captured him in golden hour light. His beard was neatly trimmed, his flannel shirt wrinkled from being in his pack. Behind him, barely visible in the deepening shadows between two distant trees, was a figure. Could be a shadow pattern, Ranger Torres had said, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. I zoomed in as far as the resolution would allow. The figure was humanoid but oddly proportioned, as if hunched. The head appeared slightly too large, though the shadows made details impossible to discern. When was this taken? I asked, checking the timestamp. 3 days ago, 6:42 p.m. The next series of photos showed Marcus's dinner preparation. The sunset, stars emerging above his campsite. Everything looked normal, though I couldn't shake the feeling of unease as I flipped through them. Photo hash 59 made my blood run cold. It was taken from inside Marcus's tent, looking out through the mesh window toward the campfire. The angle suggested Marcus had been lying down, perhaps taking an artistic shot of the flames through the tent material. But there, just beyond the fire's glow, stood a dark silhouette, clearly a person, clearly watching the tent. I couldn't finish my sentence. We know, said Ranger Torres. The timestamp says 11:18 p.m. The next morning's photos started normally. Sunrise shots, breakfast scenes, trail markers. Around midday, photo hash 74 showed Marcus at a mountain overlook, arm extended in a typical selfie pose, his smile broad and genuine. Behind him, perhaps 30 feet back on the trail he'd just ascended, was the figure again. This time there was no mistaking it for a shadow. A person dressed in dark clothing stood watching. Their face was obscured by what appeared to be a dark balaclava or mask, with only the eyes visible as pale spots in the darkness of the covering. He didn't notice, I whispered, more to myself than to the ranger. How could he not notice someone following him? Photo hash 78 was the first that made me physically recoil. It appeared to be taken while Marcus was asleep. The perspective was from above, looking down at Marcus in his sleeping bag. His eyes were closed, face peaceful in sleep. Someone else had taken this picture with his camera. The timestamp, 2:14 a.m. As we continued through the photos, the story they told became increasingly disturbing. Daytime shots showed Marcus hiking, completely unaware of the presence that appeared in roughly every fourth or fifth image, sometimes as a distant figure on the trail behind him, sometimes as a partial shape just visible at the edge of the frame. The subject appears to be stalking him, said Detective Harmon, who had joined us by this point. These aren't coincidental appearances of another hiker. Night photos became more frequent and more disturbing. All taken while Marcus was presumably asleep. his hand draped over the side of his sleeping bag, his hiking boots carefully arranged at the tent entrance, his face. From increasingly close distances, the sound of Sarah sobbing in the next room became a horrifying soundtrack to our viewing. "There's one more sequence," Ranger Torres said softly. "I need to warn you. These are difficult to view." The last sequence began with Marcus taking a selfie at his second campsite. Timestamp 7:19 p.m. He looked tired but happy, the orange glow of sunset warming his features. In the background, just at the edge of the clearing, the figure stood openly watching, no longer hiding. "He still doesn't see it," I said, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. "How is that possible?" The next photo made Detective Harmon curse under his breath. It showed Marcus, still smiling, but now there was a hand visible on his shoulder. The hand wore a black glove. Marcus's expression showed no alarm. His eyes looked directly at the camera, not at the person who must have been standing right beside him. The timestamp, 7:20 p.m. The final photo was taken 1 minute later, 7:21 p.m. Marcus's expression had changed subtly. His smile remained, but his eyes held something new. Recognition, fear. The hand was still on his shoulder, but now the figure was partially visible behind him, the masked face leaning slightly forward, as if whispering in Marcus's ear. That was the last image on the camera. The ensuing investigation revealed disturbing details. Forensics found no fingerprints on the camera, other than Marcus's. The only footprints around the second campsite belonged to Marcus and the search teams. "It's like this person knew exactly how to avoid leaving evidence," Detective Harmon explained during one of our many updates. "We're dealing with someone experienced." 2 weeks after finding the camera, search dogs located a shallow grave 3 miles from the second campsite. The medical examiner determined Marcus had died from asphyxiation. Fibers found in his throat matched a specific type of microfiber cloth, often used for cleaning camera lenses. What transforms this from merely tragic to truly terrifying is what we discovered next. When investigators ran the case details through their databases, they found similarities to 3 other disappearances over the past 5 years. All solo hikers or photographers, all found with their camera equipment missing, or in one case, their hair memory cards wiped clean. In each case, other hikers in the area had reported seeing a photographer on the trails. Someone heavily equipped with camera gear, face obscured by hats and neck gaiters, keeping to themselves. 6 months have passed. The case remains unsolved. Park rangers have implemented new safety protocols and warning systems for solo hikers. Sometimes I wake up at night thinking about those photos, about how someone could stalk another human being for days, documenting their pursuit, before finally making their presence known. What haunts me most isn't just what happened to my friend. It's the realization that this predator might still be out there, watching through viewfinders, selecting their next subject. I've stopped hiking alone. I've stopped taking nature photos. When I see someone on a trail with professional camera equipment, and their face partially covered, my heart races uncontrollably. Last week, I received an anonymous envelope in the mail. Inside was a single photograph. A zoom shot of me sitting at my window, working at my computer. The image was perfectly composed. The lighting expert in the reflection of my computer screen, barely visible but unmistakable once seen, was the dark shape of someone standing behind me. I have moved 3 times since then. I never turned my back to windows, and I've destroyed every camera I own because I know now what Marcus learned too late. Sometimes the most terrifying monster isn't the one hiding in shadows, but the one hiding behind the lens, turning your life into their art, your fear into their pleasure, your final moments into the pleasure, your final moments, last frame of their masterpiece. A popular campsite. Leafy brochures promise tranquil woods, crackling campfires under starry skies, the comforting hum of nature. A perfect escape, that's what Sarah and Tom thought. Anyway, as they pulled into site #12, sunlight dappling through the tall pines, the air thick with the scent of pine needles and wood smoke. Perfect setup, or so it seemed. Couple. Tent pitched quickly and efficiently. Fire ring cleared. Wood gathered. The comforting ritual of setting up camp unfolding in the warm afternoon sun. Relaxing. Finally. After a hectic week, this was exactly what they needed. This was exactly what they needed, until they found the note. It was Sarah who saw it first, fluttering against the tent flap, pinned there with a small, sharpened twig. A scrap of crude, roughly torn paper, the kind you'd rip from a brown paper bag. On it, starkly written in thick, uneven block letters, was a single chilling message. Leave before dark. No name, no explanation, no context, just that. Leave before dark. She picked it off the tent, turning it over in her fingers, a puzzled frown creasing her forehead. At first they found it funny. A silly prank, maybe. Teenagers messing around. But something about the starkness of the warning, the crudeness of the paper, the unsettling anonymity. It didn't sit right. A small seed of unease, cold and prickly, began to sprout in Sarah's stomach. Laughter faded quickly, replaced by a shared unspoken question hanging in the sunny air. They dismissed it initially, tried to at least. Prank, definitely a prank. Kids being kids, maybe a little too much Stephen King before their trip. Tom joked, trying to lighten the growing tension. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling. Something about the blunt, urgent command on that scrap of paper. It just felt off. They continued setting up camp, moving through the motions of unpacking, organizing, building the fire. But the initial carefree mood had evaporated, replaced by a subtle, persistent prickle of unease. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the afternoon in long shadows that stretched and deepened across the campsite. Gradually, subtly, the other campers began to pack up, folding tents, loading gear into cars, murmurs of farewells and promises to do it again, soon echoing through the trees. One by one, the sites emptied out, until it was just them. Site #12, nestled at the edge of the woods, suddenly felt isolated. The woods themselves seemed to shift, darkening, pressing closer. The familiar sounds of daytime, the chatter of squirrels, the cheerful chirping of birds, faded, replaced by a deeper, quieter register. The woods were darker now, the sounds different. No longer peaceful background noise, but something more deliberate, more watchful. They tried to ignore it. The creeping unease, the unsettling silence, the persistent image of that handwritten note. They built a roaring campfire, hoping the cheerful flames would banish the shadows, both literal and metaphorical. Campfire stories, silly jokes, forced laughter echoing too loudly in the still evening air. Tom strummed a few chords on his guitar, singing off-key campfire songs. Forced cheer, thin and fragile, like a paper shield against a rising tide of dread. But Sarah's eyes kept darting to the edge of the firelight, to the dark, impenetrable wall of trees surrounding their small circle of warmth. The note's stark warning, "Leave before dark," echoed in her mind, each word resonating with increasing weight as the shadows deepened. Dusk deepened to full night. The campfire, now the sole source of light in the encroaching darkness, danced and flickered, casting long, grotesque shadows that writhed and stretched with every crackle of the flames. Every snap of a twig beyond the firelight, every hoot of an owl in the distance, every rustle of leaves in the unseen breeze, made them jump, their nerves stretched taut as piano wire. Paranoia, cold and clammy, began to settle in, whispering insidious doubts, amplifying every imagined threat in the darkness beyond the fire's glow. They were alone, truly alone, now, in the heart of the woods, miles from anyone, anything. They tried to sleep, zipped tightly into their tent, the thin nylon walls offering a flimsy illusion of security against the vast, unknowable darkness pressing in from all sides. Slept fitfully, jumpy, and tense, every rustle of the tent fabric in the night wind making their hearts leap into their throats. Darkness pressed close, thick and suffocating, alive with unseen rustlings, unheard whispers, imagined eyes watching from the black depths of the woods. The whispered warning of the note, "Leave before dark," grew louder now in their heads, a chilling mantra repeating endlessly through the long, fear-filled night. They woke to full morning light, the sun streaming through the tent fabric, painting the nylon walls in a warm, reassuring glow. Relief, potent and dizzying, washed over them. Foolish. They'd been foolish to let a silly note spook them so badly. It was morning now. Sunlight. Birdsong. Just another day in the woods. Relief washed over them, briefly. Until Sarah unzipped the tent flap to greet the dawn, and then saw it. The tent flap. The heavy-duty nylon they'd relied on for flimsy security all night. Ripped open. Not just unzipped. Not just loosened. Ripped. Great. Jagged slashes of torn fabric flapping loosely in the morning breeze. Gaping holes torn through the tent wall, exposing the interior to the chill morning air. Not animal claws, not a bear's swipe, not a clumsy tear from wind or branches. Clean, deliberate, vicious slashes, as if made by a sharp blade, wielded with force and intent. Not an animal. Something human, or something that knew how to use a blade like a human. Inside the tent, ransacked, not neatly, not efficiently, but with a chaotic, furious energy. Sleeping bags dragged halfway out of the tent, unrolled and discarded. Food gone, backpacks overturned, clothes scattered across the tent floor. Personal items, small, insignificant things. A compass, a water bottle, a paperback book, tossed aside, carelessly strewn amidst the chaos. A violated feeling washed over Sarah, colder and more visceral than any fear they'd felt in the night. It wasn't about theft. It was about intrusion, about violation, about a message received, loud and horrifyingly clear. They left the campsite fast, no lingering over coffee, no leisurely breakfast amidst the now mocking beauty of the morning woods. Packed up in stunned silence, their movements jerky and efficient, driven by a primal urgency to escape. The note's stark warning, "Leave before dark," no longer a joke, no longer a silly prank. Someone meant it. Someone was there, out there in the woods, watching, waiting for dark. And they foolishly, arrogantly dismissing the warning, they had stayed. Stayed too long, lingered too long in a place they were clearly not welcome. A place where the shadows held more than just darkness. A place where a simple note pinned to a tent could turn a perfect campsite into a terrifying trap. They left site hash 12 behind, abandoned to the silence and the shadows, and the chilling, unspoken promise of what waited for those who didn't heed the warning, to leave before dark. The embers still glow in my nightmares. That's always how it starts. The memory of our campfire crackling in the wilderness, casting long shadows across unfamiliar faces. I've told this story to detectives, therapists, and support groups, but I've never written it down until now. Perhaps putting words to paper will finally exorcise him from my mind. The stranger who came to our campfire, the man whose real name we would later learn from newspaper headlines and FBI warnings. My wife Melissa and I had been planning our anniversary trip to Blackwater State Forest for months. 3 days of hiking, campfires, and stargazing. A much-needed escape from our hectic Chicago lives. We were both burned out from our respective careers in healthcare, desperate for the kind of peace only nature provides. The irony isn't lost on me. The irony isn't lost on me. We arrived on Friday afternoon, October 12th, and found the perfect spot. A small clearing about 2 miles from the nearest marked campsite. Secluded, but with a stunning view of the valley below. The isolation was intentional. We wanted privacy. Stillness. The ranger at the entrance had mentioned they were understaffed that weekend, and recommended staying on marked trails. We nodded politely and promptly ignored his advice. The first day was perfect. We hiked until our legs ached pleasantly, took photos of rust-colored leaves, and made love in our tent as rain briefly pattered overhead. That night, we built a modest fire, roasted marshmallows, and talked about finally starting the family we'd been putting off. The forest around us was alive with sound, the distant hooting of owls, the rustle of nocturnal creatures, the whisper of wind through dying leaves. We didn't hear him approach. "Beautiful night for a fire," came a voice from the darkness. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Melissa's hand found mine and squeezed hard enough to hurt. He stepped into the firelight, a man in his mid-30s, tall and lean with a neatly trimmed beard. He wore hiking gear that looked expensive but well-worn. A large backpack hung from broad shoulders. Nothing immediately threatening about him, yet my pulse wouldn't settle. "Sorry to startle you folks," he said, his smile revealing perfect teeth. "I'm Daniel, been hiking since dawn and spotted your fire. Mind if I join you for a bit? It gets lonely out here." I remember looking at Melissa, silently communicating our reluctance, but Midwesterners are polite to a fault, and turning away a fellow hiker seemed unnecessarily rude. "Sure," I said finally. "I'm Jeff. This is my wife, Melissa." He nodded at her. Beautiful name for a beautiful lady. The comment hung awkwardly in the air. Melissa shifted closer to me. Daniel sat across from us, setting his pack carefully behind him. "You two from around here?" "Chicago," I answered, deliberately vague. "Just a weekend trip." "Ah, city folk seeking nature." He nodded knowingly. "I've been on the trail for 3 weeks now. You lose track of time out here." As he spoke, I noticed details. His fingernails were immaculately clean for someone who claimed to have been wilderness hiking for weeks. His beard, while giving the appearance of ruggedness, was precisely trimmed. His hiking boots showed wear but no actual dirt. "Where are you heading?" Melissa asked, her voice steady despite her grip on my hand. "Wherever the path takes me," he said, staring directly into the fire. "I'm between jobs, between lives, really." The way he said it, "between lives," made something cold slide down my spine. He pulled out a flask and offered it to us. We declined. He shrugged and took a long pull. "You have a nice setup here," he said, eyes scanning our campsite. "Quality tent? Good gear?" I nodded, increasingly uncomfortable with his assessment of our belongings. "And is that a Subaru Outback down at the trailhead?" "Saw it on my way up." "New model, right?" I hadn't mentioned our car. We'd parked nearly 2 miles away. "Actually, we took an Uber," I lied, trying to keep my voice casual. "Dropped us at the main entrance." Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe. He recovered quickly. "Smart. Less to worry about." The conversation continued as the fire died down. Daniel told stories of his travels that seemed inconsistent in their details. Places he claimed to have hiked that I knew were closed to the public. Wildlife encounters that didn't match the regions he described. Each inconsistency was minor, but they accumulated like snowflakes, building a weight of unease. More disturbing was how he watched Melissa when he thought I wasn't looking. Not with lust, but with a calculating intensity, as if memorizing her features. The wind picked up around 10 p.m., bringing with it a distant sound, like metal scratching against metal. That raised the hair on my arms. "What was that?" Melissa asked. Daniel smiled. "Just the forest settling in for the night. Nature makes all kinds of sounds humans aren't meant to understand." The way he said it, humans, as if he counted himself as something else, made my stomach clench. "Well," I stood abruptly, "we should get some sleep. Long hike tomorrow." Long hike tomorrow. Daniel nodded but made no move to leave. Mind if I sleep by your fire? My tent has a tier I haven't patched yet. Every instinct screamed no. But before I could formulate a polite refusal, he added, I saw a couple of guys hiking this direction earlier. Rough-looking types. Probably nothing, but better to have strength in numbers. The implicit threat wasn't subtle. We're not alone out here, and I know it. Sure, I said finally. Fire's all yours. Inside our tent, Melissa and I whispered urgently. We need to leave, she said. It's pitch black. We'd never find the trail. It gives me the creeps, Jeff. Me too. But we're safer waiting until morning. We decided to take shifts sleeping. I would watch first, then wake Melissa in a few hours. I kept our hiking knife close, though the thought of actually using it seemed absurd in the moment. From inside the tent, I could see Daniel's silhouette as he added wood to the fire. For nearly an hour he sat motionless, staring into the flames. Then he began to move around our campsite, examining things, picking them up, setting them down. I held my breath when he approached our tent, but he merely circled it once before returning to the fire. At some point, exhaustion overtook vigilance. I fell asleep. The morning sun filtering through blue nylon woke me with a start. Melissa was still asleep beside me. I had never woken her for her shift. Panic surged through me as I frantically checked my watch. 7:34 a.m. Unzipping the tent as quietly as possible, I peered out. The campsite was empty. Daniel was gone. So was everything else. Our cooking equipment, food supplies, backpacks, Melissa's camera, all vanished. The carefully arranged campsite of the previous evening was now barren, except for our tent and the sleeping bags inside it. Melissa, I hissed, shaking her awake. Everything's gone. She sat up, disoriented, then scrambled out of the tent behind me. The car keys, she gasped. Where are the car keys? I patted my pockets frantically, knowing the answer before completing the gesture. They had been in my pack. That's when I saw it, placed precisely in the center of our extinguished campfire. A hunting knife, its blade coated in something dark and flaking. Blood. Beside it lay Melissa's driver's license, removed from her wallet, with a single word scratched into the plastic. Soon, we ran. In our socks, without water, without phones, we ran down the trail toward where our car was parked. Every snapping twig sounded like footsteps behind us. Every bird call seemed to carry a human intelligence. The forest that had seemed so peaceful now felt like an accomplice in some terrible design. The car was still there, but the tires had been slashed. On the windshield, written in what looked like crimson lipstick, I'll find you. It took us 3 hours of walking along the main road before a park ranger